counting down.
Yep.
So we're live, but we haven't started yet. So which way do I need to move?
Bit to the left, I would say. To your left. Then we should be sweet.
To my left. This way?
Correct. 30 seconds till lift off.
You can hear me fine?
Yeah. Right, we're live. G'day guys, welcome once again to the Tripod, the first pod of 2019. We're absolutely stoked about this one. If you've followed us before, you know what we do. We break down the NRL from a betting perspective. We've done this, we've been punters for over 12 years now, but we've done it on Facebook and on our app and on our website for the last 4 years. We've won at a 60% clip over the last 4 years. And as you would have seen in the graphic previously, if you'd followed all our tips over the last 4 years, or even last year, you'd be up tens of thousands of dollars. So we certainly have done all right for ourselves, and that's not even including all the epic multis. We won 100-1 multi last year on the NRL as well. So Jacob, good to see. Well, I'm not going to say good to see you, but it's good to have the NRL a week away.
Yeah, how are you, Ratbag? Yeah, can't wait. And look, I'm bloody looking forward to the NRL this season. And I think the only people in the world looking forward to the NRL more than us are probably the bookies, because they make so much money. They make money hand over fist every year on the footy season, because the vast majority of punters don't actually really know how to beat the bookies, but still give them plenty of money anyway. So whether you followed us into our fifth season now before, or you never have, I promise you that if you stick with us each week, you're going to learn a few things about a few tricks and a few strategies, both how to beat the bookies and also how to avoid giving them money. We're going to talk about the prospects of all 16 teams tonight. We're going to keep it pretty fast because we want to keep it in a tight time frame. We've even got a couple of future value plays. And I will just say that these are not like set in stone predictions. The beauty of being a punter is you have to be fluid. You have to react to who's in form and who's not. And our opinions are going to change week to week on who we are going to bet our money on. But this is just an overview. And we have found a couple of teams there could be value on. So we'll see. We don't want to put a lot of money in a future because the prices are often not fair for the punter. And why tie your money up for 6 months when we're going to be able to hopefully help guys win money each and every week?
Yeah, absolutely. And so today, like Jacob explained, there'll just be a brief rundown. We're going to go through all 16 teams. We'll put up on the screen for you the name of the team and their odds to win the comp. And we'll just give a basic rundown of, not exactly where they're going to finish this year. We might give you a general overview, but are we trying to buy this stock? Are we trying to sell this stock? Are we high on this team? Are we low on this team? We'll give you a general idea of how we're going to look to bet those teams in the upcoming season. We're going to go in order of basically odds to win the premiership, shittest to best odds. And we're going to start with the Bulldogs at 61-1. They are quite deservedly at 61-1. They're the worst team in the comp from a betting perspective. I think they're going to be worse than last year. I'm down on the Bulldogs. You knew how much I hated the Bulldogs last year. In terms of personnel, I think they've downgraded. Obviously, they lose Clemmer, who's an absolute workhorse. They replace him with Dylan Napa, which is kind of a wash, I would say. I'd probably almost rather have Clemmer. But you've lost you've lost the Morris brothers, and you already lost Woods, halfway through last season. So I think the Bulldogs are going to be worse this year. What do you think, mate?
Yeah, last year, if we remember, they did finish the season very spirited, actually finished 12th. And they are an effort team. They've got a lot of honest players who will work hard, but they do not have the talent of other sides. The backline is very ordinary, one of the least talented in the comp, I'd have to say. The pack is still decent. You mentioned adding Napa. Clemmer's a big loss, but Kawera Naira as well into that second row helps. Reece Martin seems to be out of favour, but they do have a bit of depth in the back row. That's about the only place they have depth. And look, for me, their season is going to depend on the play of the young halves, Marshall King and Lachlan Lewis. They're going to have big years. I'm not expecting much from Foran, not expecting much from this team. I do have them 16th.
And I can't argue with you. Next up, we've got the Eels at 41-1. You know what? This might surprise a few people. I'm actually higher on the Eels this year than obviously last year. I mean, last year they won the wooden spoon. But let's not forget, 2 years ago, this was a very, very good team. A well-coached, solid team that put in week after week. And I think last year was just an abomination. They lost their first 6 games. And I think from there, it was just an uphill struggle. They just couldn't get back on track. You know what? In terms of personnel, I think getting Blake Ferguson really helps. I think that power forward pack struggled a little bit last year. He's going to be able to bring the ball out of trouble. And I really think that getting rid of Hayne, getting rid of Corey Norman, I understand these are talented guys, but from a team chemistry, from a distraction standpoint, I think the way the Eels operate, they're just that 2 years ago season, they were a well-coached, solid team. They put in every week. Guys like that, that are very talented, that, don't put in every week, they're not good for the culture. I think the Eels are going to have a much better season this year. And because people are so low on them from last year, I think you're going to get some good value betting opportunities, especially through the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season.
Yeah, I think this is a confidence team. Funny, a year ago, it was us who predicted the slide of the Eels because they'd come off losing in the finals to the Storm, and they were like a top 4 favourite last year, and we were the ones saying, let's pump the brakes, this team might not make the 8, and people didn't think that sounded too smart 12 months ago. But now, once again, I'd say you mentioned well coached. The pressure is on Brad Arthur. I don't think he can have another failure, but I can't see them going too far. I pose one question. Is there a singular player on this team who is Origin standard? I just don't see match winners. And you mentioned Blake Ferguson. He might be a guy that springs to mind, or Moses on his best day. But I worry about Fergo. Is he going to bring his best? He's not in a disciplined team that is, elite. He is not really knocking on the door for Origin anymore because there's a new wave of talent come through. New South Wales won last year. A guy like Nick Kotrick or Mansour, they'd be probably ahead of him in the pecking order. Will he become a bit disinterested? He's got his big money contract. If this team is losing games, it's going to be very interesting to see the play of this Dylan Brown. Everyone's talking him up, this young Kiwi half, and obviously it becomes Moses' team now. They've got a few kind of flashy players, so I think on their day they can win, but they have to bring the effort. The effort was not consistent last season. I don't think that they're good enough to make the 8. I've got him about 13th.
They're definitely not making the 8 in my eyes. And another team that's not making the 8 in my eyes is the Sea Eagles. They're 41-1 to win the comp. If anything, I think they've probably gotten slightly worse from last year. They got the new coach in there with Desi Hasler. Hopefully he can bring something there. I'd struggle to see that, honestly. And another reason is obviously their best player, Tommy Turbo, is going to miss, at least the first few games, maybe even more. So, without him, I think they're really going to struggle. I understand Cherry Evans is still there, but you've still got to look who's going to even be playing with him. I know they picked up Kane Elgey, but really, in my eyes, is he a second grade player? Probably. Or you've got an aging Trent Hodgkinson. I understand he can kick goals well, which they fucking need, because when Cherry was kicking goals, it was a farce last year. But putting in either of those guys to partner Cherry Evans, I just can't see them coming up with enough points without Tommy Turbo. But obviously, everyone knows that Tommy Turbo's out, so maybe you won't get as much value on them to start the season off. But yeah, I'm really down on Manly. I think they'll probably finish bottom 4.
For me, it's the curious case of Desi Hasler, because in his prime years, when he was coaching that original Manly team that had that golden era of the Stewarts and Jamie Lyon and very deep team that made a couple of grand finals, he went to the Dogs. He took them to more than one grand final. You would have argued he was one of the best, probably 4 coaches in the game. By the end of his tenure at the Bulldogs, they were the least imaginative and worst attacking team in the comp by far. And he went from a team where his hallmark was that the forwards could become ball players and that everybody could pass the ball and play make. And by the end of Dez's tenure, it was one off the ruck to a front rower on 4th tackle or nearly on 5th tackle in attack, and that's exactly what the opposition wants. So now does Des see the error of his ways? Does he bring back a bit more of expansive play? This team, it's built around some really stud players. Turbo, I reckon, is going to be as good as anyone in the game, albeit he's going to be out for the first 3 or so weeks. Cherry, the Australian, halfback. Coruscant can have a big year. Tapau is a gun prop. And, of course, Jake Trbojevic. Every club would love to have him, but they're so thin everywhere else. They're going to be having to play about 350 grand under the cap because of salary cap sanctions. They will get killed with injuries. They will get killed at rep time as well. And for that reason, and you already mentioned Turbo's not going to be there to begin. So, look, before they actually cop all their injuries, they may be a team you could bet on and they could actually scrape in some games. But through the season, I just do not see how this side's going to compete, and I think they'll be bottom 4 as well.
Completely agree with you. And Don't have many bets that we're giving out today, many value bets, but here are the first ones. We've got 3 plays on this one. None of these are official best bets because generally our best bets are around $1.90, pick 'em bets, and no lower than $1.80. But the Titans, $41 to win the comp. Look, they've upgraded massively in the offseason. You look at who's coming into the team. You've got Tyrone Peachy, Shannon Boyd coming over from the Raiders. I understand that he doesn't quite go that well with the new style of footy because he's bloody unfit, but he is still a big body to put in there. Tyrone Roberts comes back to the Gold Coast, Riley Jacks, Brian Kelly. You get all these talented guys. You don't really lose that much. You lose Kane Elgey, you lose Connie Hurrell, but really, was he that great last year? So the Titans have upgraded big time. Mal Meninga picked them to win the comp. Now, they're not winning the comp, let's be fair, but they have upgraded their team, and they're a team that we loved to bet on last year because they just put in every single week, and especially last year when they were, pretty shit bottom dwellers, you get these massive double-digit lines on the Titans, and they're just in it till the very end. Ash Taylor had a great year last year. I think he's going to be much improved. You've got a bunch of young, talented guys on the team. Unfortunately, you still have the very worst player in the NRL. Do you know who that is, Jacob?
No, surprise me. I would have said probably Michael Leacher.
No, it's Bryce Cartwright, mate. It's fucking Bryce Cartwright.
I was going to talk about Bryce.
He's absolute garbage. The one concern I have with the Titans is the draw. They have a bit of a rough draw this year. So you take the top 8 sides from last year who, should be close to or pretty much up there this year. The Titans play 6 of those 8 teams twice this year. So that's half their season against top 8 teams from last year, or more than half their season against top 8 sides from last year. It is a tough draw, but I do think the Titans will be much improved, and they could get into the 8, and like we've got on there, for a flyer, they could make the 4.
Yeah, they are my breakout team for 2019, and I'm not copying Mal, but when I look at each side, I really see so much improvement. And we've got to remember the NRL, the closest comp in the world. The Titans were a competitive side on their day, could match it with a lot of good teams last year, but they did not have consistency. And as you said, they really haven't had any major losses. Sorry, Connie. But they've made a lot of key additions. I think Tyrone Peachy, I hope that he does bring his discipline and his best efforts. He can really add to that team. Shannon Boyd has played for Australia before. If they can get anything out of Cartwright, I'm prepared to give him one more chance. He was supposed to be a star rep player in the making. He's obviously had a shocking 2 or 3 last seasons. But if he can add, and so many other key players are young. Ash Taylor, this is his put up or shut up season. AJ Brimson I don't think he's going to get named at fullback, but he needs to become the fullback of this team. Tyrone Roberts will bolster the halves. I really like some of the outside backs too, like a Philip Sammy. A lot of these, and even the forward pack. Jai Arrow will have a monster year. You've got really rock solid forwards like origin level forwards in James and Jared Wallace and even, Kevin Proctor, who's played for New Zealand. A lot of these guys are younger and still improving. I see improvement all across the board. I have them 5th, so we've given it out as a possibility. They could be in the mix for the 4, I think paying 11 to 1, and really good value at $3.50 to make the 8 as well. And definitely a side that will be underrated, at least for the first few weeks of the competition. And if they do play as we predict, then that might not last too long. But a team I'm looking to bet on for sure. Love the Titans.
Love the Titans. Next up, we've got the Tigers. They are 31 to 1 to win the comp. I'm actually really down on the Tigers. I'm really down on the Tigers this year. I think they haven't done too much in the off-season. I mean, you bring in Ryan Madison, you bring in Robert Jennings, but what does he do? All he does is bloody drop balls over the try line. You bring in Moses Mbai, and I expressed my feelings about Moses Mbai throughout last year. I think he is overrated. You lose Lolohea, who they actually didn't really like that much. The Warriors didn't like him that much either. But you lose Nguama, you lose Malachi Watene-Zelezniak. And let's just be fair here, all right? The Tigers had a great season last year. They came 9th. They overachieved massively. They won so many close games. I understand Josh Reynolds was injured for most of the year last year, but let's be fair. He's not setting the world on fire. He's old. His body's breaking down, as we can see. I don't think Benji Marshall's going to have the season that he had last year. I think that was an anomaly. I'm just quite down on the Tigers this year. I think last year is not a true reflection of that team's roster. Too many close wins. I think, that regresses to the mean this year, and I think they could be a candidate for a bottom 4 team.
This is another team that doesn't blow you away with ability, but another side that definitely put in a lot of effort consistently last year. And you're right, they did overachieve, and they did that through tenacious defense. It was particularly the covering defense. They made so many covering tackles. They were very difficult to score on and a very good completion rate. They didn't beat themselves. They made the opposition beat them, and they definitely snuck up on a few teams. And we saw earlier in the season that they pulled some big upsets. Are they going to sneak up on people this year? Maguire in, Cleary out. I don't think that's an upgrade. I thought Ivan Cleary had this team playing so well, and you've got Benji Marshall and Robbie Farah in your key positions. It's a lot of pressure on Luke Brooks. He's the one who needs to run the show. He actually had an awesome season 2018. He was one of the reasons they did, knock on the door of the top 8. But this year, I can't see him being any better. So, yeah, I had him right around 12th.
Sounds good to me. And next up, the Warriors. They are also $31 to win the comp. Obviously, the big news coming out of the Warriors in the off-season is that Shaun Johnson is no more. Obviously, you lose Mason Lino as well, who, played great for them when he got the opportunity last year. Simon Mannering obviously has retired as well, but to be fair, he wasn't that great. He was getting a little bit old, and they haven't really added anyone, the Warriors, so I think they're not going to have as good of a season as they did last year. They still don't know. Well, I don't know, and they still don't know who's going to replace Shaun Johnson there in the halves. They're tossing up a couple of dudes, but either way, it's going to be a downgrade, to be fair. And I mean, Blake Green is there, but he's just solid. So I think that in order for the Warriors to succeed this year, I think RTS is going to have to really be just as awesome, if not better than he was last year. He's going to have to take over some of that playmaking role, which you saw him do in some of those preseason game last week. But yeah, I'm down on the Warriors this year. I just really struggle to see how they put on points unless one of those halves ends up being an absolute star, because Blake Green is not the most creative half, that's for sure.
Yeah, he works so well as a complement to a creative half, but if he has to be the number one option, that's a big problem. Another problem is if you're saying RTS has to be better than last year for them to succeed, and he won the Dally M last year.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm down on him.
Yeah, and they're an unpredictable side at the best of times, but I think that this halves situation, it's such a cock-up, really, that they let Johnson go, but they'd already let Lino go. I think that will cost them games, and that's going to keep them out of the 8 as well, I think. I've got them 11th.
11th is probably fair. I'd say even maybe a little bit lower. The next team on the list is the Raiders at $26 to win the comp. Not a whole lot of off-season stuff. Obviously, like we explained before, they lost Shannon Boyd, Junior Paulo, and Blake Austin goes. But like we talked about a lot last year, I really thought that Blake Austin deserved to be in the halves for his playmaking ability. But his defense was absolutely terrible. So now you bring in a couple of Wigan guys. I think that, the Raiders last year, it was just such a terrible, terrible season for them. Bateman is very good, been very good for Wigan. And the Raiders, I looked through all their losses last year, they had so many close losses, and what we as bettors try and do is if a team finished really bad, you look back at some of their wins, some of their losses. If they had a lot of close wins, maybe they weren't as good as the latter position suggested. But the Raiders had a ton of close losses, a ton of losses where they were up double digits late and just let the game go. I think that surely can't happen again. Caesar and Whiten have to be much improved this year. Ricky Stewart is on the hot seat. I think that the Raiders really start the season well because Ricky Stewart knows if they don't, he's on the chopping block.
In fact, it wasn't just last year. It's now 2 years in a row. They've lost a comical amount of close games. It goes beyond the point where you say they've just been ridiculously unlucky. They have a mental kind of barrier they can't break through, and they could not win close games.
I think they were unfit too, to be honest.
That is very true. A very big side that did struggle late in games. So it wasn't all just luck. There were reasons for it. This team will really miss Rapana, who got hurt on the Kiwis tour late last year. He's the best outside back in this team for me. You mentioned Austin. He's gone. And Jack Whiten into the halves. I never really saw him as too much of a playmaker. So White and Caesar, I really want to see how they play together. Are we getting 2017 BJ or are we getting 2018 BJ? I've got a lot of question marks.
I'm not getting a 2019 BJ.
That's for sure. I'm right there with you. And I just don't see the consistency, but you're right. I agree, Ricky, on the hot seat. I'll tell you one thing. They did play like a top 8 side when Hodgson got back in the team.
True.
In the last third of the season. And he's going to have a full off season and he's there and he's the focal point for me. But I still, as I mentioned, they've got to write this, closing games to threaten the 8. I have them 12th.
Yeah, that seems probably fair, except I probably have them slightly higher than that. I think they can contend for a top 8 spot. Next up, we've got the Knights, $17. A lot to talk about here. Obviously, a lot of off-season moves for the Knights. Likewise with the Titans, probably a similar amount of off-season moves. I think they've upgraded massively. You bring in Tim Glasby. You bring in Ramian, who's an absolute gun. You bring in Mason Lenor, he can fill in there. You bring in Clemmer, who's an absolute workhorse. Heimel Hunt, Kurt Mann, just the list goes on, and they haven't lost too much. So I'm high on the Knights this year. I will tell you one thing though, you know, with a team, when you get a lot of off-season changes, sometimes it does take a few weeks for that all to gel, for the chemistry to get there, for the team to find their feet. So I think a lot of the square punters out there are kind of looking at this Knights team. They've recruited so well in the off-season, and they're going to say, oh, fuck, I'm going to bet on them straight away. They look really tasty to me. Those odds look good. I'm kind of on the flip side. I would say I would want to wait a few weeks to see how the Knights go. I think they will start a little bit slower just because of all of those off-season changes, and they will get better as the season progresses. So I'm going to look to probably stay away from the Knights, not necessarily bet against them for the first few weeks, but then start to bet on them more as the season goes on.
You mentioned the turnover or, great recruiting class. Let's remember they won the Wooden Spoon 3 seasons in a row. And actually last year they recruited a number of good players, headlined by Mitchell Pearce. And you're right about the chemistry. It's not just the attacking combinations, it's the defensive combinations that takes time and a lot of, a bit of gameplay for them to really gel. And another, massive factor is, why is Kalen Ponga playing in the 6? This guy is one of the superstars of the league, and I've got no doubt that he will be amazing in the 6, but I think his true position is fullback. You want him with the ball in space. And I just wonder whether Connor Watson will be the right answer at fullback. You look at, when we get to the Dragons, they kind of realise that small guys can't last a full season at fullback, and it doesn't work, and they've abandoned the Dufty experiment. And I just don't understand why Kalen Ponga isn't in the number 1. I think in the modern game, your most deadly ball runner should be in the number 1 jersey. So that's going to be interesting to see. I have no doubt that him and Pearce will still play well. Pressure on Levi. He's a guy who's played rep footy for New Zealand. He needs to get good quality pelt to his, quality halves. I think they actually are a little bit weak in the back 5. I should say the outside 5 backs, because they've moved Ponga into the halves. But a great recruiting class. Pressure on. This is the year that they really will expect nothing less than to make the finals. And I think they will get it together. I think they do have enough talent around that team. And I just think they're going to have a great buzz. It's a one-town team, great home field advantage. And I believe that team has good chemistry. You could just kind of see when they play together. This team had the worst points differential last season, which one of the reasons was because it took them a while to improve their defense. So defense must improve. And if it does, they make the 8. I've got them 7th.
Yep, totally agree. I saw a comment coming through there from Andre asking what the Knights are to make the top 8. I think you can grab them for right around $2 at the moment. So if you can get them anywhere above $2 and you do like the Knights, that's probably the bet that you want to jump on. Next up, the Cowboys, $17 to win the comp. Obviously, last year was just an absolute abomination for the Cowboys. Thurston was literally the walking dead through last season. They had injuries galore. And just dudes played horrible for them. Like, Coote was just terrible. Michael Morgan was horrible, but I'll put that down mostly to injury, to be fair. So I look at last year's Cowboys side, and I think everyone's just going to look at that and say, they did terrible last year. Now they lose Thurston. They're going to be even worse. I actually really like the Cowboys this year. I think they're going to be much improved. You pick up Maguire in the off-season, which is a big boost. You pick up Kahu. You pick up a bunch of Broncos. You pick up Nene McDonald to throw on the wing. I think a lot of people, it's probably a sharp side to be on, to be fair, just because of the season that they had last year was just so bad, injury riddled, bad losses, and just the energy around the team. And it was basically like, I liken it to like Kobe's farewell year, where basically he played that last year with the Lakers, but he was just a fucking liability. And Thurston is one of the greatest ever. Don't get me wrong. But last year he was terrible, and it hurt that Cowboys side. Josh Maguire, Cal Malolo in the forwards, just being a wrecking ball. I love it. Give me the Cowboys all day.
And we've put the odds alongside every team. That's not us saying we would bet on that team to win the comp. That's just letting you guys know relatively kind of what their chances are. And I think the fact that they are 17-1 is kind of obvious. Most people know that they will be better this year. So the question is just how much better. They did have a really rough season. For me, it's going to revolve around Michael Morgan, because I want to rewind to 2017 when he was the best player in the NRL and he was phenomenal, taking that team without JT, without Matt Scott, all the way to the grand final. Of course, they had another JT, Taumalolo, who was still as good as any forward in the game. Now, you mentioned Morgan was awful last year, but the news kind of came out after a few weeks that he was battling a sports hernia around the groin abdomen area. He did not have the same speed, and it changed everything he did, not to mention he had to readjust to playing with JT. Then he ended up tearing his groin when he got stood up by RTS, and he was out for the season. Now he should be back, and if he's fully healthy, maybe he can play. If he can play somewhere near 2017 form, he will right the ship here. I love the addition of Nene McDonald, a beast outside back. We've spoken about a few of the wingers. I think more than ever before, wingers are important in the NRL. There used to be they used to be people that hung out with footballers, but now your wingers are almost an additional couple of forwards, because they're the ones that start your sets, and you do need some star game-breaking backs. Nene is that. They obviously lost Barber, but I wasn't expecting Barber to set the world on fire. It's been a lot of years since he had a meaningful impact in the NRL. Kahu's a sneaky addition there. I think this is a rock-solid team. You mentioned the forward pack. It's so great. Don't forget McLean, who's not an addition this year, but was injured almost all of last year, so I count him as an addition as well. It's as deep a pack as any in the comp. I just worry if they've got enough speed. I see them as kind of a big team, a strong team, but not a fast team. I have them 8th. They'll make the playoffs or the finals, but I don't actually see them quite as elite as some others.
Fair enough. We'll move on to the Sharkies. Same odds, $17 to win the comp. I'm kind of neutral on the Sharkies this year. Obviously, the big off-season signing was Shaun Johnson. They pick up Josh Morris as well, but to be fair, I don't think he is that great. But you lose Jesse Ramian, who's an absolute beast. You lose Edric Lee, who's not that good. You lose Ricky Latelli, he's okay. But you lose Valentine Holmes, and you lose Luke Lewis, who was, old, but he was a leader in the locker room there. So you've basically flipped Valentine Holmes for Shaun Johnson. I don't think that's a good flip for the Sharks. I think, Wade Graham, they're going to miss him for, what are they saying, about half the season now. I think that's a massive loss for them. So I think they're really going to struggle, especially through that first half of the season, while you're missing Wade Graham and while Shaun Johnson is still trying to figure out combinations and that kind of thing in that Sharks roster. So I think especially early on in the season, I'm going to try and look to fade that Sharkies team.
Man, this team has as much variance as any. I just want to remind people, this team could have won the comp last year. If we go back to the first week of the finals, they had the Roosters beat. They butchered 3 different tries in a very tight game. They basically lost their whole season on a grubber by Cooper Cronk that deflected right around the goalpost. Wade Graham, blew his knee out in the same moment that the ball bounced into the arms of Cooper. He plonked it down to grab a lead in that finals match. And then Luke Lewis dropped a key opportunity to take the lead back in that game. And obviously we know the Roosters went on and won the comp, but if the Sharks had won that game, they would have been the ones with a fortnight break. The Roosters would have been the ones going the long way around the mountain. The Sharkies ended up getting blown out by the Storm in the prelim, but if you don't win that week 1 finals game, it's so much tougher. So the Sharks were really impressive, but this is not quite the same team. As you mentioned, Wade Graham out for 12 weeks, and there's no guarantee he's himself when he gets back. It's a serious injury.
Yep.
And you lost your other best player in Valentine Holmes. These are massive losses, as well as Ramian. You lost your coach. There's all the turmoil there. They're going to have to play under the cap as well. So that's a fact that people need to understand, that they might have to still offload one of their key starters, because I think they have to get about over $300,000 under the cap. A guy like Chad Townsend could be out the door. It hasn't been said yet who they might look at cutting, but that's going to be a key loss as well. But on the other hand, there's still a lot of talent. But if I look at the best players on this team, Matt Moylan, Josh Dugan, Shaun Johnson, Andrew Fafita, these are high variance players. On their day, they can carve you up, and on another day, they can be injured or lay an egg. So this could go, either way, not to mention a first-year coach in Johnny Morris. There's a lot on his plate. This team, could beat anyone on their day. Also could have a really long season. So did we put up the possibility of Sharks to miss the 8? We were definitely throwing that around as possibly value.
We did not.
If it doesn't go well.
We did
not.
not.
Were definitely, we said maybe at $2.05, which was the best price. Not quite enough value there, but we were talking about, the wheels could fall off. Well, one other guy I just want to shout out, is this Bronson Cherry. He supposedly would have played last year at the age of 17 if the rules had allowed. He's 18 now, supposed to be a future superstar. So that's going to bolster the outside back. So, as I say, high variance team could go one way or the other. I'll be very interested to see how they go.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to the Dragons, they are $13 to win the comp. I'm actually a little bit down on the Dragons from last year. Obviously, we know what happened last year. They went great guns for the first half of the season, and then as the Dragons always do, they shit the bed at the back half of the season. But that was mainly due to Widdop being injured and, playing basically, 50%. And he's the cog that drives that Dragons team. And I really just worry about Corey Norman coming into the halves to partner Ben Hunt there. I just really, really worry about those halves. You move Widdop back to fullback. I worry about that too. I think he needs to be in the halves. His kicking game is absolutely brilliant. And, Dufty, where is he going to slot in? I thought he was a perfectly capable fullback. So I think in terms of that, they've probably gotten slightly worse in terms of those skill positions at fullback and in the halves. In terms of the Dragons, I think, they did well, obviously, and they finished well on the ladder last year because they had an absolutely gangbusters start to the season. I don't think we're going to see that again this year. I'm a little bit down on the Dragons, especially, like I said, towards this first quarter of the season, because getting those halves to gel and getting Ben Hunt to play better than an absolute fucking third-grade rugby league player, which he did last year, is going to be a tough ask. And then obviously Widdop shifting back to fullback. It's a lot of changes for that Dragons team.
Well, Hunt did play well earlier in the year when they were March premiers, and enough to actually get himself the Queensland number 7 jersey, although we saw that Cherry did a better job in Game 3 when Queensland did win, but that was too late. Now, Widdop is such a star player. At fullback, I still think he can be effective. Norman is the key here. I think the season's going to hinge on how well Corey Norman plays because he has the talent. We've seen it in his best seasons at the Eels. I don't want to judge him on one trial game, but, watch the Charity Shield, and I barely noticed Corey Norman even playing. I worry if he's too concerned about selling T-shirts than he is about being a star rugby league player. Very solid, experienced forward pack. McInnes is a gun, number 9. If they don't try and win the comp in the first 6 weeks, I still think this team should definitely be there or thereabouts. So I've got them 6th.
Yep, that's fair enough. Let's move on to the Panthers, the team that everyone's basically talking about through the last week or so. They're $10 to win the comp, and that hasn't actually moved since, obviously, the full scandal around the Panthers team has come to the forefront. I actually think they've gotten worse in the off-season. They lose guys like Christian Crichton, who was decent, Harawira Naira, who was decent, Peachy, who was actually great for them. He filled in for the halves last year for a bit when they had an injury in the halves. I just really, really worry about these first few weeks, all this off-field drama. We talk about this. I mean, we bet all sorts of sports. We bet the rugby league, we bet NFL, we bet NBA, and it's just the distraction. And distraction is almost never good for a football team. I understand that sometimes when you have, off-field drama or whatever, and you have a distraction and then you get over that, it can be kind of a galvanizing thing for the team. This is just a lot to take in. They're bloody, people are getting arrested now. They're going to have to front interviews all the time. The media is going to ask them about it everywhere they turn. I'm a bit down on the Panthers, and I'll just say one thing, who the fuck, can these rugby league players grow a brain? Dead set. Can you root a bird without having to film it? How dead set dumb can you be? They never cease to amaze me.
I've never done that.
Never filmed yourself rooting someone, or filmed someone else rooting someone.
No, I've never rooted a bird.
That's true, fair enough.
Anyway, so who are we to judge, really, mate?
That's true.
If you probably would.
Yeah, fair enough.
Look, Ivan Cleary is back, though, so that is an addition there because, it was a shit show at coaching last season with Hook and then with Serraldo in and Gus pulling the strings, whereas I think the Clearys reunited. That's a positive. Will all this turmoil galvanise them? Will it distract them? We don't know. Another thing that will hurt this team early is Kikau has a knee injury. He's not going to be there. When he gets back,
he is a beast.
He's as damaging back row as any. He's a monster, and I can't wait for him to get back. And I think that the talent will prevail. I do think Ivan Cleary steers the ship, and I think the fact that it's not too many key players that were involved in the controversy, that they will get past it. Good leadership in this team and experience. And you got a guy like Wateni Zelezniak who set the world on fire in the tests at the end of last year. Mansource, who's had a couple of injuries, healthy again. There is just too much talent for this in this team for them to fail. I believe that they should be pushing top four. Even last year, if they hadn't had all the garbage going on with the coaching, they probably were a top four side. So I have them fourth, but I wouldn't be betting on them early in the season.
And that's fair enough. Whenever you got Maloney and Cleary in there, you know they're going to be right about up there. The next bet we've got for the night is on the Rabbitohs. The Rabbitohs are $9 to win the comp. We're actually both down on the Rabbitohs this year. You can find them to miss the 8 at $3.50 on Bet365. I think if things don't go their way this year, that is certainly a decent wager, and that bet is $3 or even less on other sites. So that $3.50 is the best price out there on Bet365. They've gotten much worse in the off-season. I understand they bring in some dudes, Ethan Lowe, Corey Dennis, Liam Knight, but look who they lost. They lost Angus Crichton. The guy is a rep-level beast. They lost Robert Jennings, who is a speedster. I understand he drops the ball sometimes, but he's still good. You lost Hymel Hunt. He's good. Fui Mayono, Richie Kenner, who was an up-and-coming beast. They get worse. You get Bennett coaching, who I struggle to obviously we live in Brisbane. We're Brisbane Broncos fans, but I really worry about Bennett's coaching ability getting into the latter stages of his life now. They're still going to be a good team, but they have gotten worse in the off-season. Crichton is an absolutely massive loss. The Burgess boys were pretty average last year. They're going to have to improve. Whether they can or not, I don't know. Reynolds is obviously still there, but let's not forget, he's a year older now. He had some injury dramas last year. We know that he's a bit susceptible to injuries, and he's integral in terms of that team's success. Like I said, we're down on the Rabbits this year, and not saying that they will miss the 8, but $3.50 is a decent price for that.
Don't forget, we're the very same pod that a year ago tipped the Rabbitohs to be top 4, and nobody else really even had them in the 8. No one saw it coming last year, but we did see the ability there to be a contender, and we made a lot of money betting on the Bunnies last year. But one of the things that was the key to their success was the expansive style play under Seabold. And he, did a great job, and he unlocked a lot of potential guys like Damien Cook, who played a lot of reserve grade, was instantly, a state of origin star. And he got the ball out wide to his, gun outside backs. And you said the Burgess brothers weren't great last year. I think you've got to give them a little bit more credit. They did come third, and I thought that all three contributed well. But I do feel like this team gets older. I think Sam Burgess, when you rely on him as your best forward, I don't think he's improving at this stage of his career. Certainly Johnny Sutton, same boat. You lost your best, edge rower in Angus Crichton, as you mentioned. Cam Murray might have a big year, but you kind of touched on it. You're relying on Adam Reynolds. You're relying on GI. Even Alex Johnson, when he's healthy, is a star, but has been plagued with quite a few injuries. So I do worry that they need those key guys to get healthy, because I actually don't think the Bunnies have as much depth this season. You mentioned some of the losses. I don't think that interchange bench looks too strong at all. And then it's a war of attrition in the NRL when injuries mount up. So I have them 9th, and they very well may make the 8, but at $3.50, I actually think that's a worthwhile wager, decent value there, because they're not going to be a contender this year, I don't believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we're getting to last year's grand finalists, the Storm. They are $9 to win the comp this year. I am down on the Storm this year. I know that if you've listened to us over the last 4 years, we've kind of been down on the Storm for most of those years. We kind of always said, that spine is getting older every year. At some point, they're going to have to break down a little bit. And what happened since then? I mean, they bloody won the comp and they made a final last year. But to be honest, we made money betting on the Storm because obviously they did well, but everyone knew they were good as well. So we were getting big point spreads on the Storm. But let's just see who they lost last year. They lose Tim Glasby, a rep level player. They lose Riley Jacks just for depth, and they lose Hoffman, a good leader. And obviously the big one is they lose Billy Slater. They haven't really picked up anyone in the off season. I know that you love Munster. I don't love Munster. I don't think he is that good. Obviously, he's an origin level player. I don't think he's that good. Sue me. All right. Now, is Munster and Brodie Croft going to be able to do it in the halves there? You move Hughes to fullback. It's not that great. I understand they've still got a very good forward pack, but they've gotten thinner since last year. I don't think the Storm are going to make the top 4 this year. I'm down on the Storm. I think a lot of people won't be because obviously they made it all the way to the grand final this year. But just beware, the Storm aren't going to be as good this year as last year, that's for sure.
And one of the reasons we've had so much success in the last 4 seasons is we have different perspectives on the ways that we break the games down. And when we make a best bet that we share with people who follow, that's when we both agree that something is value. But we do not always agree, and we don't agree on Cameron Munster. I have a question mark on Cameron Munster. Is he the best player in rugby league right now?
You're off your fucking tiny little head, mate.
People are forgetting this because he had a shocking grand final and he lost the plot at the end of it. I think he was as deadly as anybody in the game last year, and the team will revolve around him because they won't want to burn out Cam Smith. I think he'll pick his spots and maybe not even be an 80-minute player anymore. But you've got Brandon Smith there as well on the bench who can come in and play 9 or just help him out in the back row. I love him. I know that they did lose Glasby, but they were so deep in back rowers, and it's just going to open up opportunities for other guys like Kenny Bromwich to play more, Christian Welsh. And, okay, you lost Slater, but honestly, to have Jerome Hughes and Scott Drinkwater, and I know Drinkwater's got the pec tear, won't be available, but it would have been a headache anyway because they couldn't fit them all in the team to begin with. This team is so stacked. Adokar, Vunivalu, Curtis Scott, up-and-coming star, and the front row with, your Jesse Bromwich and Nelson, and the best coach in rugby league. So I still believe this team knows that you really need to be top 4 and ideally top 2 to host that first game to win the comp. And I think that they're as deep as any side, as well drilled and as experienced. I have them right now winning the minor premiership and definitely in the top 4, and not a team that I go out of my way to bet against. Although when we find our spots, you're right, you can get a lot of value and you can get some big point spread. And certainly there's no team that we don't bet against. There's no team that we don't bet on either in the rugby league. That's one of the keys to our success.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is the Storm are kind of like the New England Patriots. Everyone knows that they're so good. So all the public bets on them, but they continue to cover the spread. So yeah, especially when you're betting against the Storm, you really need to pick your spots properly. We're going to our home team, the Brisbane Broncos. They are second favourites to win the comp, which I think might surprise some people. But let's not forget, they were a very, very solid outfit last year. Off-season changes, the big one is probably, losing Josh Maguire, and, obviously Kahu as well. But you have a lot of up-and-coming young dudes on that Broncos team, and they should be absolute weapons. Let's not forget that, they have one of the best forward packs in the comp. I know that, Sam Thaiday retired last year, but really, he wasn't that much of an impact player anyway. My big question marks with the Broncos, as always, and I said this at the start of last year, and I'm going to say it again, is the halves play. Can Nikorima and Milford improve to an extent where they can just be above average halves? Like last year I said that, is anyone going to argue with me? And I think you might have. But if I say that they're a bottom 4 halves pairing in the comp, and coming into this season, I don't know, maybe they are, maybe they're not. But they're really going to have to improve. They're going to be able to get some go forward. My worry is the halves, and my worry is Darius Boyd at fullback. He's getting older. He's injured. He wasn't that good last year. Can they play competent enough on the back of that beastly forward pack to win some games? That's the only worry with this Broncos team. But if they can, then they can go all the way.
Yeah, Boyd is only 31. In terms of athletes with modern sports medicine and the extended primes of players, and you look at, Cam Smith has signed a 2-year deal. Darius Boyd should still be able to play at a high level, but I question whether he should be in this team because I do wonder at this point, is Jermaine Asako the better fullback on this team? And I spoke earlier in this pod about how vital it is you have your strike players in the key positions. But what I love about the addition of Seabold is he will unleash the gun outside backs the Broncos do have. Your Jimmy the Jet, your Corey Oates, and your Asako. And the forward pack, you lose Maguire and Thaiday, but a guy like Tavita Pango Jr. is ready to take the next step. I look at him and I see potentially the next Jason Taumalola. He's that much of a devastating force out there. And of course, Matt Gillette, people might forget as well. He's a Queensland star back rower who had the neck problems and never was able to return last year. Of course, Jack Bird, similar boat, just a season-long injury. So they're both players that have, had multiple good performances at Origin level. back into this team that can play back row, or Bird may end up in the centres. And of course, the young brigade that's coming through, guys like David Fafita, Jaden Sewer, and Katoni Staggs, also versatile back row or centre. So a lot of options, a lot of depth. And that's why I have this team second this year. I think they're second favourites, and most people do see the improvement. I think Seabold will take them to another level. And the one thing that will hold him back is potentially the halves. But I'm a bigger believer in Milford than you probably are. So he's still a very young guy as well. If he can get to, reach his potential, this team can threaten even the Roosters.
Yeah, definitely. I'll add one thing just to add, on the back of your comment there about Seabolt changing, I guess, the coaching style and that sort of thing. You saw what he did with the Rabbits last year. It was an expansive type of play. They had fast dudes. They were spreading the ball around. He's going to try and do the exact same thing here with the Broncos, and I think they do have the speed to play that kind of expansive footy. He said that he wants to speed up the play of the ball. He wants to spread the ball earlier in the tackle count. So what can you do as a bettor when you hear this sort of information? Because you look at Bennett last year with the Broncos, it's always been a defense-first kind of team, get through your sets. So what I would suggest is that we're probably going to look at doing this, is look at betting some overs and Broncos team total overs in the first few games before that trend sort of cottons on. Because generally in the first few games of the season, for team totals, for game totals and that kind of thing, they just use last year's stats until a new trend forms through the first few weeks of the season. So I'm certainly looking to bet some overs in Broncos games, especially early on in the season. And then now we get to last year's premiers, the Roosters, $4 to win the comp. That's probably as low as we've seen in a little while, and it's warranted. I mean, they do have quite easily the best roster in the comp. They had it last year, and now they add Angus Crichton and a rejuvenated Brett Morris. I don't know where that came from. They add Ryan Hall coming over from Leeds. They lose Blake Ferguson, so I mean, switching him for Brett Morris is probably a slight downgrade, but you get Angus Crichton, who is an absolute monster. You lose Dylan Napper as well, which is not great. But all in all, I think they probably stayed similar, if not got even slightly better. So, but the issue is everyone knows how good the Roosters are. You just have to look at the odds. They're fucking $4. They're half of the second favourites odds to win the comp. So the issue is you're not going to get that much value on betting on the Roosters because everyone knows they're so awesome. What I will say, and what we said last year, is teams that know they're going to be playing finals footy sometimes don't come into the season. They ease their way into the season. They're not going to come in trying to just, win every single game at the start of the season because they know it's a long season and they're going to be playing additional weeks come playoff time. So what we try and do is with these really good teams that know they're playing finals footy is look to bet against them in the first few weeks because they might be just coming in a little bit rusty. It's been a long off season for them. They played the grand final. They travelled over to England for the World Cup Challenge. They're going to be fatigued and they probably won't try and start as quickly as some of those teams that really need to win early on.
Yeah, we said all season long pretty much. We released power ratings, which is the 16 teams ranked 1st to 16th, and with a number associated of how many points we would favour each team by. So not just who's hot at the time, but who we truly believe is better than each other on a neutral venue. And we pretty much had all season long the Roosters as the best team in the comp, and they are just absolutely stacked. The rich get richer. But and we said the same thing last year, actually, that this season we really have an opportunity for the first back-to-back premier since the 92-93 Broncos. And it's just crazy that it hasn't happened for, 18 years. And there's reasons for that. And one of them is, the players, maybe they're not as hungry. You have to be desperate and you have to, have that desire as a squad to win. Another reason that it's so hard to repeat, everyone's big game is when they play you. Everyone gets up for it and you play, everyone on, who is really fired up, and it does take a toll through the season. And another reason is a lot more players make rep teams and it gets harder and you get injuries and you get more burnout. A guy like Luke Keary, probably has to be thrown into the mix for Origin halves for New South Wales, even on a winning team, because of how well he played through the final series last year. And they're going to have a host of other blokes who are playing rep footy this year. So it's all going to
hurt. And another reason is if you win the premiership, other teams are going to think, fuck, we want ourselves some of those players, and those players on the premiership team are going to want more money and shit, as well. So
Exactly, salary cap league, and everyone, watches you and sees what you do and tries to figure out how to stop it. So there's lots of reasons in saying that they have an opportunity. I believe they're going to be in the top four, but as you said, I think they'll pace themselves. They know that you don't win the comp in March. A team like the Dragons doesn't seem to know that, and they're going to be worried about the little things and the little details through the year and improving rather than trying to just throw the kitchen sink at teams early on. So it's a side you might bet against in the first month of the season, but
Agreed.
They'll do what they need to do. Probably Cooper Cronk last year. They'll be there in September for sure, and they'll be bloody hard to beat. And, Tedesco, we kind of said when they got him last year, there was already a stacked team, and he's, another one of the probably best 5 players in the game, and I expect him to build on an amazing 2018. And that wraps it up. That's all 16 teams. So obviously we didn't talk about any of the week 1 matchups. That's going to be next week at this time, where we'll be breaking down every single game individually and finding best bets for everyone who watches us.
Yep, and all the info's there on the screen. Basically, if you do want to follow our bets this season, the bets are going to be posted exclusively in the Tripod app. It's free to download. Just search Tripod in your App Store or Google Play. That's where you get the tips. If you want to banter about the games in the game threads and stuff like that, just make sure you join our group. It's Tripod Punters Tips Forum. There should be a link to both of those, both the app and the group, in the description to this video. And we'll be back to annoy you guys next Wednesday. That'll be 6 p.m. Queensland time, obviously 7 p.m. for Eastern Daylight Savings Time. But that's where we'll break down round 1. That's where we'll give out all our bets, give our information on all the 8 games of round 1. So make sure you tune in to us then. But thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in a week's time.
Cheers, guys.